Hello, this is another one of my videos on Shaykhism, this one dealing with Denis Hermann on the early development of Shaykhism. This comes from a long article on Shaykhism in the Encyclopedia Iranica by Denis Hermann, dating from 2017. Denis Hermann is the director of the IFRI, that's the French Iranian Research Institute, and the author of a book on Karmani Shaykhism and the Ijtihad, which has been published by Ergon in 2015, as well as the French work on Shaykhism in the Qajar period, social and doctrinal history. There's obvious overlap between some parts of this video and the ones I posted earlier on Shaykh Ahmad and Shaykh Kazem. But there are also differences of emphasis, certainly, and sometimes other differences, I think partly stemming from the fact that both McEwen, whose work I was citing on Shaykh Ahmad, and Amin Eshraghi, whose work I was citing on Shaykh Kazem, their main focus is on the early Shaykhi movement, whereas Hermann's interest is very clearly on the later Shaykhi school, particularly that in Karbala, so this may account for some of the differences of emphasis. Anyway, Shaykhism is a religious school of tribal Shi'ism, whose founding is attributed to Shaykh Ahmad who was born in eastern Arabia. He studied in the Shi'i shrine cities of Iraq at the end of the 18th and at the beginning of the 19th century. Shaykhism emerged in parallel with the decline of the traditionalist Akhbari school of exegesis. Its dominant branch, now known as the Kermani branch, could just as well be considered a partial continuation of the Akhbari school because it perpetuated the critique of the principles of religious law, that's the emphasis of the Usulis, adopted by the rationalist school, by denying any legitimacy to ijtihad. Like the Akhbaris, the Shaykhis declared their opposition to both the philosophers and the theologians. However, whereas the Akhbaris criticized the latter using a literalistic reading of traditions, Shaykh Ahmad formulated his rejection via theosophical investigation and esoteric arguments. Thus, Shaykhism is based on both traditional and charismatic authority. On the one hand, the Shaykhi school claims to be a return to the foundations of Shi'ism, that is, to the teachings of the Prophet and the Imams contained in the Hadith. On the other, it stresses the fact that the science of Shaykh Ahmad and of Shaykh Kazem Rashdi was inspired by the prophets and the Imams, in particular the Imam of the time, that is the hidden Imam. Shaykh Ahmad was born in 1753 in a small village near Al-Asa within the territory of Bahrain. From his earliest youth, he displayed a great interest in and real aptitude for the religious sciences. He was said to be able to read Quran at the age of 5. He began to study Arabic and then theology with many nearby authorities. It's possible that at that time he was also reading the works of the Imami scholar Ibn Abi Jumhur Asai from the 15th century. At the same time, it appears he frequently experienced intense visions in which he saw the Imams in dreams. Shaykh Ahmad was on the whole unsatisfied by the possibilities for study in his native region and decided at the age of 19 to move to the Atabat, that's the shrine cities in Iraq. Until the end of the 1790s, he studied with several Akhbari masters. As a result, he received ijazat, documents certifying his ability to transmit the education he'd received, from a number of important religious leaders of the time, or Sunnis, including Sayyid Muhammad Mahdi Bahrul Ulum. Shaykh Ahmad left the Atabat around the year 1794 in the wake of a serious epidemic and returned to Bahrain, from which he had to flee once more because of attacks led by the Wahhabis in the Shi'i regions of eastern Arabia. He then settled at Basra, frequently shuttling back and forth between this town and the Atabat. In 1806, then aged 53, he decided to make a pilgrimage to Mashhad in Iran to the tomb of the 8th Imam, Ali al-Reza. He then remained in Iran for nearly 10 years, visiting many towns. First, he stayed in Yazd, where he taught between 1807 and 1813. At this time, the ruling Qajar monarch, Fath Ali Shah, invited him several times to join him in Tehran. As-Sa'id initially declined, but later on relented, but then moved on to Esfahan. As-Sa'id's distancing attitude towards the ruling Qajar dynasty has since been interpreted as the symbolic foundational act of Kermani Shaykh's apoliticism. Shaykh Ahmad then wished to leave Iran, but the governor of Kermanshah, Muhammad Ali Mirza Dawlat Shah, asked him to settle in his town. He established good relations with the prince and stayed there for 2 years. At that time, Kermanshah was a very dynamic town because of its location on the road between Iran and the Atabat. As-Sa'id left Iran finally in 1816 on a pilgrimage to Mecca and then stayed in the Atabat for a while. But he returned to Kermanshah in 1819, going on tours from there to visit other Iranian towns and cities. He remained in Iran this time for about 5 years. His teaching made him famous and renowned throughout the country. A conflict occurred, however, in 1824 in the city of Qazvin. One of the ulama of this place, Mullah Muhammad Taqi Barakani, declared a takfir, an excommunication order against As-Sa'id. During this period, As-Sa'id also composed critical commentaries on the work of Mullah Sadr Shirazi and also criticized other philosophers of the Esfahan school, such as Mullah Faiz Kashani. He had also called into question the usual interpretation of the clerics concerning the spiritual body, the Jasad al-Baqi, during the resurrection. This last doctrine also implied a new reading of the role of the world that mediates between the physical and spiritual worlds that As-Sa'id called Hegeliah. After this conflict at Qazvin, As-Sa'id remained 1 more year in Iran at Camp Kermanshah before leaving for Karbala. But even that town had now become dangerous for him, and so he left with his family, heading towards Mecca. He died on the 27th of June, 1826, and was buried at Baqi Cemetery in Medina during a pilgrimage. Some 200 works and treatises are attributed to him. Only after the excommunication of Shaykh Ahmad and then his death could the Shaykhi school truly be said to have been born. It was organized and structured under the direction of Sayyid Kazem Rashdi, one of the Shaykh's most faithful pupils. As-Sa'id had designated him as his qualified representative. Sayyid Kazem was born in Rasht in northern Iran to a family of Arab origin that had fled Medina and settled in Gilan 2 generations earlier in the wake of an epidemic of plague. He left his town at the age of 15 to join Shaykh Ahmad in Yazd. Thereafter, he accompanied him everywhere until he himself settled in Karbala at the request of his master in 1825. That is where he taught. The Shi'i community was then blemished, this is Hermann's word, by a new split. A small number defected to this new Shaykhi school that was developing at the time, led by Sayyid Kazem Rashdi, whilst the majority still adhered to the rationalist Asuli school. Sayyid Kazem died young. Here we have a difference in dates. On the 2nd of January, normally it's given as the 1st of January 1844, at the age of 45. This is a little bit awkward because we have different dates for his date of birth, so we don't really know how old he was when he died. He appears to have been poisoned on the order of Najib Pasha, the Ottoman governor of Baghdad. That is very much the Kermani Shaykhism view of the matter. As I mentioned in the previous video, other people doubt that poisoning. He composed some 400 essays and treatises, many of which are lost, apparently because his house and library were looted twice. The origin of the first Shaykhi networks in Iran goes back to the time when Shaykh Ahmad himself lived and taught there. He enlisted an initial group of disciples who then in turn taught the religious sciences. Nevertheless, nowhere in Iran is there a Shaykhi community going back to the time of Shaykh Ahmad as-Sa'i. This sounds reasonable because the Shaykhi school had not really yet been created during his lifetime, even though he influenced many scholars in Yazd, Esfahan, and Kermanshah, the three Iranian cities in which he lived and taught the longest. It was in fact the excommunication of Shaykh Ahmad in 1824 that prompted his disciples to form an independent current within Shi'ism, but this only occurred at the end of as-Sa'i's life. Thus, the oldest Shaykhi communities in Iran go back to the time of Sayyid Kazem, who put great effort into the propagation of Shaykhi doctrine. Rather than developments in Iran, the highest priority at this point was the consolidation of Shaykhism in the Atabat, notably in Karbala, which at that time was the most prominent intellectual center in the Shi'i world, and where Sayyid Kazem Rashdi benefited from some of the funding provided by the state of Awad or Oud to the ulama of the town. It was in Karbala that Sayyid Kazem met the most distinguished Shi'i scholars. He succeeded in organizing the Shaykhi community of the town into a small but cohesive and coherent group. A distinct Shaykhi movement now developed. The many historic events which took place during the years following as-Sa'i's death only reinforced a sense of unity amongst his disciples. Sayyid Kazem began by stimulating many doctrinal debates with the great Usuli figures in the Atabat of the time. This was determinative in the construction of a Shaykhi minority to oppose the Usulis that had themselves only recently overtaken the Akhbaris as the dominant school. At the time, these more open polemics also aggravated the insecurity in which the Shaykhis lived. Some of the town's non-Shaykhi ulama organized an anti-Shaykhi front. Sayyid Kazem felt threatened in particular after a debate that took place on the 18th of January 1828. In particular, he faced Sayyid Mahdi Tabatabai, Muhammad Jafar Ashtabadi, and Muhammad Sharif Mazindarani. Sayyid Mahdi Tabatabai declared the Shaykhis to be infidels, kufar, and held many meetings for the purpose of urging the ulama, as well as the general population, to require the expulsion of Sayyid Kazem from Karbala. Then a stronger campaign, led by Sheikh Ali Kashef al-Geta, who sent letters to the religious leaders of many Muslim countries, including the Ottoman Empire, India, and of course Iran, to request their support in his struggle against Shaykhism. At the same time, however, several major Usuli figures opposed this campaign against the Shaykhis, the most influential being Haji Ibrahim Kalbasi and Mullah Muhammad Baqir Shafi. Sayyid Kazem then went to Najaf to take part in the debate, during which he demanded a halt to the slander and defamation against the Shaykhis, despite his caution, reinforced by the practice of dissimulation, taqiyya, regarding many doctrinal questions. This was the beginning of physical attacks on his person. He escaped several assassination attempts, and his home was attacked several times, and his library burned. Hermann also discusses these terms, Bālāsari and Shaykhi, which we'll come back to in another video. The early Shaykhis preferred to call themselves Kashfiya, those who reveal, or Poshte Sari, behind the head of the Imam. this term contrasting with the term Bālāsari, above the head, which designated those who position themselves above the head of the Imam in order to pray when they visited his mausoleum. Shaykh Ahmad had forbidden his disciples to pray with their back turned to the tomb of the Imam Hussein at Karbala, and his basis for this was a hadith stating that when one visits the tomb of an Imam, he is in fact present with the believer. During the 19th century, the term Bālāsari increasingly came to designate only those Shi'is who were frankly hostile to the Shaykhis, rather than to all of them. Sometimes, rather than being called Bālāsari, the adversaries of the Shaykhis were referred to as Mutashari, those who were tied to the law. This was especially true in Tabriz. It was primarily their adversaries who bestowed on the Shaykhis the title of Shaykhiya, but the Shaykhis of whatever stripe accepted this title and gradually stopped calling themselves Kashfiya. The later Kermani Shaykhi master, Abu Qasim Khan Ibrahimi, noted, "We are they who are called Shaykhis and are the disciples of the Shaykh, because in his teaching we find the complete tradition of Shi'ism with all its virtualities it implies. This name was given to us. We did not choose it, but we accept it as an especially valuable badge of honor, for because of its inherent meaning and its true sense, to us it is the equivalent of the title Muslim, and because they thus distinguish us due to our association with our eminent Shaykh, it also happens that they call us a minority. We glory in this appellation as well, for at the very time of the holy Imams, their companions and their friends, too, were never more than a minority." So, many thanks to you for listening, and particular thanks to my patrons for their kind support and encouragement. Without them, I wouldn't be able to make these videos. Please, you're very welcome to support my channel if you so wish. Like, comment, and share on the videos. It really helps. Subscribe if you want to be notified of future videos. I'll give Patreon and PayPal links below if you want to provide practical support. And next week, we'll talk about Shaykhi divisions in the 19th century. Have a good day.